Should be live now. Kevin?
Hello, good sir.
Hello. How's it going?
Hold on. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
All right, great.
Very good. Just give me just a quick moment here, and
Yeah, take your time.
how's your evening been? Oh, not too bad.
Great.
I'm listening to myself. I'm getting a lot of feedback from the stream.
Oh, yeah?
Chris,
Hold on one second. Yeah, dude, hold on. Here you go.
Thank you.
Yep.
What you going on? Playing this song?
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
Thank you. I'll be right back.
All right, man.
So while I'm getting this all set up, you want to tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Chris, and I study philosophy and religious studies at Georgia State.
Okay.
I've been doing that for a while. I like it pretty good. My views are a little bit alternative. I don't really subscribe to any doctrines. I don't belong to any particular church, but I've noticed that there's a lot of similarities between philosophy and religious studies.
Okay. So would you consider yourself like a non-denominational Christian?
I guess that's the best word for it. Yeah.
Okay. Or there's non-denominational Christian. There's also another one that people like to self-identify as. Would you be in the camp of someone who would say spiritual but not religious?
I'd go with that.
Okay. And how long you been studying?
Since 2000. Well, no, since 2002.
Okay. So quite some time. What's the end goal?
Yeah. I don't know. To either write a book or become a preacher or something. I don't know.
Okay. Do you need I guess the philosophy of religion to be a preacher?
What's that?
I was gonna say, do you need the that that high of a degree to be a preacher?
To be the best one, yeah. I mean, to be the best one that I can be, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And if there was a school of doctrine that you would be leaning more towards, whether it be Calvinism, Protestantism, any of that, what would you say?
Gnosticism.
Oh,
Gnosticism.
okay.
Yeah.
So would you have you I'm assuming, have you read the Gospel according to James or Thomas or
Thomas is my favorite book, actually.
really?
Yeah.
Because there's really no substance to that. It's just
Oh, dude,
quotes.
it's genius. It's
It's
one of the best I've ever read in my life.
it's just a series of quotes. There is no narrative. It's just him
Right, there's no
talking.
narrative. Yeah, there's no narrative. I mean, I got to be honest with you. Like, ever since I read like the entire Bible and some of the Gnostic stuff, like there are lines and some of the coincidences with Socrates' life. I've noticed. I believe that a lot of the narrative is supposed to be taken as parable. So, like for instance, in Proverbs, it says that to heal somebody's like lame feet is to teach them a proverb. So when you hear about Christ teaching or healing the lame, what I think it means is that he's teaching them how to learn proverbs, and the rest of it
Yeah.
kind of goes along with that.
You know, actually, one of my favorite Gnostic comes from the Gospel of Thomas, and I think one of the apostles were talking among each other, and they were talking about Jesus, and one of the apostles turned the other, and if I'm not mistaken, it was either Jesus or it was a conversation between the apostles, and he was like, "You have ears, but yet you do not hear me," and I was like,
Right.
How like that is something that I think anyone can take, from. It's like there's so many people who will talk through you to continue to keep their, I guess you can say, um, I wouldn't say echo chamber. There's a word I was looking for. Uh, internal
Belief system?
consistency.
Right.
You know,
Right.
reaffirmed. So, yeah, and it's most of the people that I've been seeing on these forums, especially like on Facebook, for instance, seem to kind of lack that ability to engage. Really, you can
Yeah.
you can spout scripture all day, but if you don't put a human mind or an element to it, and
Right.
if you're just a drone who can, read off, every single parable and its meaning, that's fine. But if you don't have, I wouldn't. It's not necessarily the context, but more along the lines of if you aren't willing to tell me how it actually relates to the world that we inhabit, then it's useless.
Yeah. Absolutely. I fully agree. I fully agree.
So, since it's interesting because I've actually never spoken to anyone who believed in the Gnostic Gospels. A lot of
Yeah, I don't know why.
I don't. They came out relatively the same time period. We know the historicity of what people, why they decided which books were going to be canonized, but
Right.
to see it's written around the same times. They have very similar narratives. The bigger things is I can see why they did throw out some of them simply because it doesn't portray Jesus as, let's say, a perfect figure.
Right. I can see that. Yeah.
And to think that the stories where Jesus killed his friend just to prove a point.
Right.
Um, you
That was
know,
Infancy Thomas, wasn't
what's that?
That was Infancy Thomas, wasn't it?
I'm not.
Or did he do it in a couple?
I mean, there's several of them. I mean, you have the Gospel according to Mary, you have the Gospel according to Jesus himself. I mean, you think if there was
There, I
one
didn't know
that
that.
would kind of be like, hey, this is what he actually said. He actually wrote it down, and this is the only
Right.
account that we
Right.
have from the man's words himself. You think that would be something worth investigating? Nope, I'm gonna write it off
Yeah.
completely. It's not in the Bible, but it's
I
according
agree.
to the claim being made, it's according to your savior. I think it would
Right.
be wise of you to
Include
look
that.
into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I fully
Um,
agree.
but for me, like I love looking at the other stuff because to me it almost looks it's. You ever heard of the musical Wicked?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean it takes the Wizard of Oz mythos and it takes everything and turns the camera a little bit to the left and says, okay, what was actually going on a little bit over here?
Yeah.
And the Gnostic Gospels seem like that kind of, okay, let's shift the camera a little bit, let's move away, let's see not only the impact that Jesus had after his death and after his resurrection, before in his life and his upbringing, his childhood. I mean, these are things that would seem to be relevant to the conversation, yet
Right.
it's very easy, I guess, for Christians to just completely write it off.
Yeah. I don't know why they do that. I think it just usually conflicts with what they've already been taught or something like that. But I find that there's more of a deep harmony between what they've been taught and what's been in most of these Gnostic Gospels. Or it's a little bit, I've heard, for instance, I've heard Gospel of Thomas called Christianity for Adults. So I mean, like, if you want to put it in the terms of like, there's milk, and that's what's in the Testament, and then there's meat or solid food, and that's what's something like Gospel of Thomas.
Okay, and the honey would be the prosperity gospels that are going around and stuff like that.
Sure, why not? Yeah, sure, why not?
Well, it's I was actually having a discussion with some King James literalists.
Yeah,
And these individuals took it a step further.
yeah,
They believed that English was the first language, that King
Jesus.
James, that Jesus spoke in English, and the King James version was the first book to ever have graced Earth.
I don't know what to say to that. That's fucking ridiculous.
And I mean, it compounded really because angels are stars, flat Earth,
Right.
like it went deep. You know, things along the
Yeah.
lines of I'm actually as a profession, I am an emergency medical technician, and
Okay.
that would completely discredit all of my thinking because Jesus said that germs are demons and sin, and that completely goes against everything that I do for a living.
Did he say that? Or you're
Yeah,
saying they
yeah.
said?
No, no.
Where?
Jesus. It was in Matthew, if I'm not mistaken, um,
Can we look that up?
where blindness is, caused by
Oh,
sin.
right, dude.
Um,
But we just covered that. It's caused by sin, but that doesn't mean it's a demon. Like, for instance, what I would argue,
yeah,
my personal belief, is that like the rest of the thing where, so like you've got, well, for instance, I mean, he even talks about it. He says, like, I think he quotes Isaiah when you quoted it. You have ears, but you don't hear. You have eyes, but you don't see. They
right,
look at me,
right.
but they don't perceive my meaning, all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm hearing is that it's some kind of mistaken understanding or something like that. So, like, for instance, we were talking earlier about where they were lame and then they were able to walk later. Same kind
Yeah.
of thing, because usually quotes those all together. It usually says the lame walk, the blind see, the dead are resurrected, all that kind of stuff like that.
Hmm. But from a literalist standpoint, when it
From a
says,
literal, yeah, from a literalist, yeah.
if you
Well, they're
start
fucking
off with
crazy.
yeah, I mean, as a presuppositionalist literalist, I mean, would you consider yourself a presuppositionalist or an evidentialist when it comes to scripture?
I have no idea.
Um, do you not understand the question, or
Yeah, I don't
is
know. I don't know what either one of those means.
okay? You why don't we accept Sigmund Freud's style of scientific inquiry?
This is not scientific.
But there's a reason why, and the reason is because
Can't
he
be
started
proved.
with the conclusion.
Oh, right,
He started with, okay, everyone has repressed sexual memories, okay, and I'm
right,
going to fit the data that I'm collecting to confirm that conclusion, as opposed to taking the data and taking where the evidence leads.
right,
So that would be considered an evidentialist, someone who takes the data, takes all the data, and leads it to its logical conclusion, as opposed to a presuppositionalist who starts with the conclusion and reverse engineers it.
right. Yeah,
A
yeah. I'm not a part of that.
fundamentalist Christian says, okay, we have to, like, especially the King James people who I was speaking with, they said, okay, stars are angels. Okay, that's a presuppositionalist response. Okay, we know stars are balls of gas, burning many million
Right,
thousand light years away. They have very similar properties to our own sun. In fact, they are completely identical. And as long as they're within the same scope of the type of sun, we can, that's evidential conclusion as
okay,
opposed to presuppositionalist conclusion would be no, Bible says they are angels,
right.
therefore they are angels.
Huh.
So, according to him, I don't remember that, but
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
apparently I don't. Yeah, I don't
I'll tell you
remember.
something kind of strange, though. I'll tell you something kind of strange. In Platonic philosophy, there is mention of stars being the place where righteous people go to live after they die. And I've noticed there's a whole lot of Christianity. Like, for instance, the entire conception of the soul as spirit versus flesh, that was Plato.
Yes.
For instance, yeah, stuff like the inner cup cleaning the outer cup. That's Plato.
Mm-hmm. The
Like,
inner daemon,
oh yeah, that
this,
too.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's, and I feel like maybe because of their time period, it maybe they may have been considered by some to be secular, but that
right,
it's the same reason why we consider Jefferson to be a deist or a non-believer, when
right,
in all actuality, I mean, he still had a Bible. He trimmed it up a bit, but he still was a
hmm
believer in the end.
right.
So it's really hard to say, like it's along the lines of could Da Vinci have created such a masterpiece if he wasn't actually hired by the Christian church?
That's
It's
a good point.
we don't know because we can't necessarily investigate, if that was possible.
True.
Because the only people we're hiring was the Christian church for painters. So,
Yeah.
um, but what is immensely refreshing, when I just take a moment, is you're keeping up with the conversation, and that's rare.
Yeah. I'm a
um,
ripper.
not and it's very refreshing to hear someone who knows what we're, when I say
Yeah.
Socrates or Aristotle and
Yeah.
stuff like that, just woof over completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, and I bring up Gospel of Thomas, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's nice. And I definitely studied more than my fair share of that. And I was going to say, like, to the Greek style of conversation, they have, whenever they discuss anything, they do it twice, once inebriated and once sober, just to make sure it's a good idea.
Is that true?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that's how they would, anytime they would do any political discourse, that's how they would, confirm whether or not what they were believing was actually rational.
That's great. Start doing that.
Yeah. And I got a bottle of Grand Marnier right here at the desk.
Right
So
on. Right on. Good for you, man. Enjoy.
yeah. But so what would you say, as far as, so would you say you're an evidentialist using the examples that I gave?
No, I'm definitely not an evidentialist.
Okay. So you would, so I guess the basic question that I get asked is, what do you believe and why?
I believe that God is love, and by love I mean benevolence. And the best way to be godly is to practice benevolence. And some of the best examples of benevolence, or what it actually was in Paul's Corinthians 13, 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, kind, not arrogant, not boastful, not rude. Doesn't insist on its own way, rejoices in truth, doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, stuff like that.
Okay. Actually, my favorite passage is from 1 Peter 3:15, which is the apologist passage. And it's basically along the lines of, what we're doing right now, as long as we're talking about this stuff with open hearts, and, we're not,
Yeah,
yelling at each other, there's no reason why the conversation should ever stop.
right, absolutely.
But okay, so can you define God? Is he God as depicted in the New Testament, or
My definition of God is benevolence.
okay, would you say that your God is the version of the there's two versions. There's the omni God, and there's the maximally powerful. Which one would you
Right.
say?
I try not to make that, to be honest with you. I kind of try to put those two together.
Well, we can agree by the definition of maximally powerful, it's the most powerful being that there is. Okay.
Right, as opposed to all powerful.
As opposed to all powerful. Like, I mean, you can get to the philosophical jargon of, can God create a burrito so hot that he couldn't eat it, or a rock that's so heavy he couldn't lift it. But more along the lines of, is he limited by his own creation? Is he limited by his own powers? Is he limited by the paradox of the inconsistencies? There's the omni-God paradox. The five omnis logically can't exist in the same plane of field.
I argue that they can. I argue that the shortcoming is with the all loving, and that is, so you're talking about the problem of evil. The problem of evil is so if he's all loving, he wants to stop it. If he's all good, or he's all good or all loving, he wants to stop it. If he's all knowing, he knows how. If he's all powerful, he has the power to do that.
Well, there's two things that the problem of evil presents. A, it's a paradox. It's addressing the paradox of the omni-God. Okay,
right.
If a God, it, like you were just saying, if he's all loving but he's all powerful and he doesn't do it, then he isn't all loving. If he's all, if he's all knowing, then how?
Yeah. I argue that I argue he's impartial. And I think that solves the paradox. So, for instance, when God allows bad things to happen to good people and good things to happen to bad people, he's impartial as to what they are. That doesn't mean he doesn't love us. That just means it's the same way. I mean, you could argue it's the same as when a parent spanks their child for being bad. Do they love them or do they hate them? I mean, it's easy for pain to coexist and suffering to coexist with love.
Yes, I can agree with that. then it kind of begs because there's the paradox of, well, I can come up with conclusions to it, but I'm wondering what your thought process might be in the sense that, okay, if if the object is to teach the child a lesson, can you teach a lesson without the consequence? Now,
Maybe. That's a good question. Good question.
and well, yeah, and it's a inquiry that parents have been going over since the existence.
I wonder if the consequence is the lesson. So I mean, like, what I would argue, and now this is where I get a little bit Buddhist on you. A lot of it has to do with non-attachment. So, for instance, when I get in a car accident and I have to walk 3 miles to get to my house in the rain. The problem is, and you've heard that. This is gonna make it. You know what I've noticed? Just a little side note. In my experience, one of the biggest tragedies in the world is when people sum up thoughts in really, really consistent, concise ways of putting it, so that it's like it sounds. You get what they're saying, but the problem is it comes from a source that it doesn't sound like it should be coming from. So it kind of like damages a little bit. So, for instance, you've seen the movie with Jack Sparrow, right? With Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes.
He says the problem is not the problem. Your problem is the attitude about the problem. So, for instance, the lesson to be learned then, if I get in a car accident and have to walk in the rain, is not to avoid. Well, I mean, obviously, partially it would be to avoid possibilities where I get in that situation, but more so, it's to learn to not be attached to the idea that I have to suffer while I'm going through those things. So the lesson is, don't hate it when it happens. And in fact, Christ talks about that when he says you have to hate your family, you have to hate your own life, you have to become unattached to it, stuff like that. So in that context, I believe means to love less, or in what I interpret it as, become unattached to. So when the lesson is, don't be attached to anything, and situations are going to keep coming that you're going to be attached to, that feel like they're suffering, that feel like they're negative, until you learn to not be attached to them, and at which point they will no longer cause you to suffer.
Okay. So, I mean, there's and for the most part, I would agree with you. I mean, it's just when it comes to the nature of when we're trying to define God and what his characteristics are, do we see biblical support for that? I mean, we could
for an omni-God? I don't think so.
No, of course not. I mean, every time God asks a question, he's violating so many of these just within itself.
Well, maybe. I don't know. That seems a bit extreme. I would say that a lot of his questions are rhetorical. In fact, there was something I noticed. I can't remember exactly what it was or why it was, but something about when he asked the question, it seemed to, like, have you've heard of Wittgenstein?
I want to say yes.
Yeah, he's a philosopher of logic and mathematics who said something like, the mistakes that they make in religious context are so great, they're incalculable blunders, so big that you have to wonder whether or not someone is either crazy or working outside a system of meaning that you don't understand. So, like, if you say 2 + 2 = 40, 22 + 22 = 45, you're going to say I made a mistake. But if I say 22 + 22 = 4 million, you're going to say either I'm crazy or I'm working in a different system of meaning. So when I hear things like, say, God in the Garden of Eden, when he says, if you eat this thing, you're going to die that day, and then 5 seconds later, he doesn't die that day. Or later, he eats something, and then he says, what did you do? He asks a really simple question. And then you also have, like, the serpent asking really weird questions. Did God say you could not do this? These questions are phrased in such a way that they seem to be a lot deeper than what would the surface it would seem.
Right. And if it wasn't for the fact that he already knew the answer, and if he's omnitemporal, therefore he is in all times and all existences, always.
Right.
Then the asking of the question is, I mean, and he doesn't even need to have the person reaffirm whether he's going to lie or tell the truth, because he knows the outcome already. So
right.
And now the biggest one, I think the only omni that may exist would be that one, simply because, according to
Omnitemporal?
Scripture, yeah, omnitemporal, where he is in
Yeah.
all times. Because,
Oh, right.
well,
Yeah. Because
if he's not, then um, you throw out Genesis, you throw out the fall, you throw out original sin, you throw out Revelation, you throw out the prophecies, you throw out everything.
I
If
suppose.
um,
I don't really see how that follows.
well, he knows. Well, in the scripturally speaking, I can't remember where it is. He was basically, he was talking to someone. He was saying, "Did I not know your name before I made everything?" And I'm paraphrasing. Um,
Doesn't mean
and
omnitemporal. That just means really old. Not?
well, it's insinuating that he knew, since he knew his name before creation. It's insinuating that he knew the the line of events that were going to happen to conclude that
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
it would come to that conclusion. I mean, I can't know your name if I didn't know everything that was going to precede it.
Right. I guess that's probably true.
Um,
Um, I have a theory about that, but I can't explain it. So I wish I could. But it's very new to me. It's very much on the limits of my intellect. So it's just right outside my ability to put into words right now. If we ever
right.
talk again, I'll try to explain it.
Okay. No, that's fine. See, I love the thought experiment stuff, because I enjoy. Um, there was a show that I watched recently that, okay, so you can, the Christian worldview has a determination of, there's a reward and punishment system, okay, and that's their
Right.
version of afterlife. Atheists have another version, and that would be annihilation theory.
I have never heard of that.
Uh, well, it's annihilation theory is just essentially nothing. Everything's done. Okay,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
everything that you thought was there, all consciousness that is you, is ceased to exist. Okay.
Okay.
Um, that being said, there's another seven. Okay, different potential afterlives. Okay, one of them you'll
Okay.
probably get, but I'm wondering how many more you might.
Okay.
So, what would be another form of after death?
Well, I'm of the Socratic mindset that says, you ever read the Apology?
Um, you're going down the line of thinking where I think I know where you're. So,
Okay.
just assume I do.
Okay. Okay. So basically, there's two options. One, there's something after death, or two, there's nothing after death.
Yes, those are
The
the only
first
two
one,
that.
yeah, those are the only two. So he says that what we've heard from like poets and prophets and stuff like that is that death is like a big party or something like that. So it's like, everybody you love is there and stuff like that. And then the opposite one is more like a deep sleep. So you've got two options. Either death is a party with all your favorite people there and all the greatest people in history are there, or it's a good night's sleep that's like undisturbed by dreams or something like that. That's my entire conception of the afterlife. I don't have anything of hell or heaven, anything like that. In fact,
Right.
my understanding is that heaven exists within man, so it's not something that takes place after death. Now, I've also come to the conclusion that heaven is supposed to be paradise, and if perfect peace is supposed to be paradise, then you have heaven in that sense after death. See it being anything with like angels or demons or shit like that, with devil and God and all that kind of stuff. My understanding of my experience has been that heaven is something to experience while you're on earth, while you're alive, and it's something within man. And hell, I haven't done enough research about. I have a theory that it's possibly there's a connection between hellfire and tongues of fire. I haven't really gotten that far into it yet, but my experience has been heaven is something you reach on earth. It's not something you experience after death.
Okay. So, that being said, it might have deflected from the question I was trying to reach to,
Sorry,
but
sorry about that.
no. It's but it does bring up other issues that I feel,
Yeah.
um, because I know what you're talking about, and the letter that he was writing to was basically a response to people. He has no reason to fear death at that point.
Right.
If his conclusion was true, um, but it comes down to, is that necessarily, I wouldn't say, is it biblically founded?
Right.
Your version of, let's say, an
Um,
afterlife.
Well, I mean, all I know is I believe it's Luke. All I know is that it says kingdom of heaven is within man, and the way that he talks about it, the way that he talks about the kingdom of heaven, does not sound anything like the afterlife that we've been, been given. It doesn't sound anything like that.
Well, I
So
mean,
I think mine's closer to it.
yeah, we could say that. I mean, I can argue this as a Christian. I used
Mhm.
to teach Bible classes, so
Cool.
I can look at it from well, like you were saying that people have misconstrued what heaven is and stuff like that.
Right.
And is it a castle in the sky? Is it just eternal bliss? Is it
That's
are
pretty
you
good.
are you hanging out with all your family members? Is God on a
Right.
cloud with a big bushy beard waiting with Jesus? I
Right.
mean, it's uh, just like a lot of the misconceptions of the devil. The devil's supposed to be the most beautiful creature that ever
Right.
existed.
Right.
He's and there's also the did Satan ever tell a lie? Um, if you reread, let's say Genesis, for example, there was nothing that he ever said that was untrue.
Oh yeah, dude. He says that. Doesn't he say? Doesn't he say what? Well, what's the one thing that's usually seen as a lie
Um,
in
the
Genesis?
biggest thing is death, but then again, a lot of people say, "Oh, they
Oh,
did die that day." um,
I'm gonna have to reread that because I believe there wasn't there. I don't know. You might be right. I have to reread the thing, but
well, when people read between the letters and they don't read what is actually the book is trying to convey, um,
right.
I don't. I honestly don't know where things along the lines of how Esther became a women empowerment story. I don't know
Yeah.
where people got the idea that Satan was the bad guy. Um,
Yeah. Well,
I
because he's
don't.
the enemy of mankind. He's not the enemy of God, but he's the enemy of mankind. Isn't that what they say?
Well, if you're referring to the Asatan, according to,
I have no idea what that is.
it's the I guess you could say it's like what's Jesus's real name? Um,
Yeshua.
yeah, I mean, depending on who, yeah, but Yeshua generally is what most people get to. But
Yeah.
Satan or Asatan, the divider,
Oh.
as he
Oh. Oh. Very interesting. I love that. That's one of my favorite things to do. Is so like devil means slanderer, Satan means enemy or something like that, or
is,
accuser.
the Asatan is basically something along the lines of the way that they inscribe it, because there really isn't a proper word for how they say divider, but it's along the lines of, if you can imagine a wall parting two parts of water, is what the real translation is for Satan. Okay.
Okay.
And at no point was this considered, according to historians and the people at the time, this wasn't a divisive thing. It was just someone who was the impartial mover of things to go around him. Okay, and
Hmm.
that's why he was invisible on the donkey and stuff like that. Okay, there wasn't necessarily anything good or bad. He was just in the way.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Um,
It's cool.
And then, I mean, like, there's a huge argument on whether or not the serpent was Satan, because Satan wasn't actually mentioned until that donkey event.
All right, hold on one
So,
second. One second, dude. Yeah.
yeah,
Sean's got it. Sean's got it, I think. What's up? I'm middle school. Okay. Sorry about that.
yeah, no. I mean, things along the lines of how 40 days and 40 nights is never to be taken literally, because
Mhm.
it's a Jewish idiom for a long time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, otherwise you'd have to expect that every single one of those kings ruled for 40 years. Everyone had a 40-day and 40-night cycle.
Yeah.
I mean,
They
like,
just happened to be right. Yeah.
right. I mean, that's too, I mean, it's, we don't know. It just means long time. And then it is like
Right.
added, uh, 40 days, 40 nights, that's a month. Okay. 40 years. Okay. That means a lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't under like, and a lot of young Earth creationists will look at this and be like, oh, this immensely points towards a 6,000-year-old Earth. And
Right.
I don't know how they can get that conclusion without knowing history.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't buy into that.
Okay, so is there, since you said you're a presuppositionalist and you start with the conclusion that God exists, do you have things, let's say conflicts with,
Wait, I think I might have messed that up. I think I might have misunderstood you. So I wait. All right. So all right. So is it are they the way they sound? Is that what's going on
things
with
along,
presuppositional?
your presupposition is starting with a conclusion, let's say for your instance, is God exists.
Right.
Okay,
And
and
evidentious?
evidentialists would look at all the evidence and then come to the conclusion that the evidence is pointing towards. Okay, so since if you say you're evidentialist, well, let you say when I asked you what do you believe and why, you were mentioning things along the lines of spirit. Okay, can you define that for me?
Attitude.
Okay, that seems really, I would say, of kind of a broad
Inconsistent?
brush, because we know
Yeah.
emotions and in turn would be our attitude, is a
Right.
byproduct of the mind. Okay, thing
Yeah.
between our ears.
Yeah.
Is the mind and the spirit synonymous?
They're not synonymous, but they're very similar. In
Okay.
fact, well, I would say so. Like what I'm doing is I'm taking a lot of stuff from Plato, and so for instance, like he talks about the psyche. The soul is made up of all right. So Paul says it's made up of two things, and Plato says it's made up of three things. The soul is made up of um, the rational part, the spirited part, and the appetitive part. That's the part that gets, that's like desire and
Uh-huh.
what drives you to eat and sleep and have sex and want
Right.
gain and all that kind
You're
of stuff.
primal.
Primal stuff. In fact, I believe somebody did some kind of theory that was remarkably similar, like some kind of brain theory. There was like primate
The
brain,
id, the
reptile
super id.
brain.
It's the ego, the super ego, and the id.
No, that was something different. It was somebody did something like and it was like mammal brain, reptile brain, and something else. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, the point of the story is,
Yeah.
spirit would
He's
be
trying to find your essence, right?
that's well, kinda. Um, um,
Essence in
dude,
the philosophical sense.
right? Yeah, I forgot what the original question was. Oh, is mind and spirit the same thing? I
Yes.
would say that the spirit is part of the mind or part of the psyche.
Okay. How can we distinguish between the two, and what would a mind without a spirit and a spirit without a mind look like?
I'd rather use the word soul or psyche instead of mind. By mind, I usually use the word reason or rational part. So without a spirit, the human being would look like, geez, I don't even know, apathetic.
Okay. Well, we know, let's say, for example, people's ability to empathize. Okay, and we can even conflate that
Right.
even higher as to um, the chemical compound of love.
Yeah.
Combination of norepinephrine, epinephrine, oxytocin, and dopamine.
Yeah. Right.
All four of these chemicals, we know that we can artificially inflate someone's capacity for love to the point where they're loving inanimate objects. And we know that we can chemically take these chemicals away, and they completely lack any ability to empathize with their fellow human being.
Right.
So, and we can do this with other animals as well. So when we take away these compounds and they lose the ability to empathize, is that no different than the mind, or as you would say, the soul, the physicality of it? Because that's just those, and not to be a reductionist when it comes to love. Don't try to conflate that, but
Yeah, I got you.
I still love my wife and my child. But that, just because just because a tornado's wind doesn't mean it's not not a freak of nature.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
um,
So repeat the question again.
so I'm trying to. So you were saying things along the lines of someone without a spirit would be someone who would lack empathy, but we know that if
No,
they're lacking,
apathetic. Apathetic.
okay,
Apathetic. without passion.
Okay. So, I mean, we know from split brain people that they lose their passions for part of the part that was controlling those creativities, if
Right.
they were, or if they were a mechanic, and that was their passion in life, and how they can still do the functionality and they can get pleasure from it without actually physically doing it anymore, which is very interesting how they do these experiments. So I'm trying to see, because we can see that it's still a product of the physicality of the brain.
Right.
So I don't know if I could necessarily agree with that, and I don't know how you
Okay.
could come to that conclusion.
What specific conclusion are you saying again?
That
That it is.
that the physicality of the brain isn't what you're conflating when it comes to
Oh, I think it
you're
is.
completely apathetic. You lack empathy if you have no spirit.
Um. So wait. I don't understand. I'm sorry.
Well, you were saying that the spirit is, in essence, like without the spirit, you have no apathy. Okay. So, but I'm just trying to see how you can come to the conclusion. I don't. I mean, I
I
feel like it's
think
just.
I think I'm using spirit in a different sense than the usual religious person does. By spirit, I mean like in good spirits. So when they say that phrase, or like Christmas spirit or something like that.
Okay. Um, I don't know if that's a false dichotomy or not, but I can see
It might be.
because I don't know. I still feel like it's undefined. Um,
Yeah. I still haven't. I haven't come up with a definition for it. I can come up with synonyms, but not definitions.
well, what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to see if we can if it is something and it affects us in any way, then that can be investigated. And when it comes to the soul and the spirit or any of those, I consider wuju, but um, it just um, the mechanics behind the dream catcher. Okay, it's nothing actually there.
Well, right, but the word they use in the Bible is psyche.
Okay. Um, well, then I guess I have to ask, do you think that the Bible is an accurate representation of reality?
Um, Not in a literal sense.
Okay. So then what sense would it be?
Um, Metaphorical. I've yet to see. I've yet to see. Okay, so there's two things that I want to bring up. There's some quote that I heard a while ago, something about poetry can reveal an inner truth better than raw data can, or some shit like that. And there's
Okay.
another thing that I learned in class, something about there were these pictures drawn or paintings painted with paint that dries quickly.
Yeah.
In order to do a portrait of somebody, they had to do it within like 30 seconds. And so as a result, like the one eye would be misshapen and like the mouth would be too big and stuff like that. It would be all kind of disfigured and stuff like that. And that's supposed to represent inability to capture the truth effectively as far as like accuracy and speed is concerned. But it still kind of captures some sort of reality. And so if you combine those two ideas, where we have so we have some truth that's going on, and then we have two possibilities. One, you see the significance of the truth, or you fail to see the significance of the truth. Like Jesus says, they see what I do, but they don't comprehend the meaning. They hear my words, but they don't understand.
Okay.
Stuff like that. What my understanding is that what the Gospels are about is Socrates and his life.
Uh-huh.
And so what you hear from history, it's what the most accurate representation is. However, when you're talking about the significance of who he was and what he did, you have to have something like a story about Jesus, a savior of mankind, in order to really get it.
Okay, so then it comes down to Well, do you? Oh, I don't know where to begin. Do you take everything that Jesus said? I mean, I know he spoke in parables and stuff like that, but there were things that had to be taken literally. Okay, things along the lines of, oh,
Love your neighbor.
things along in Revelation, for example, the second coming, he'll come back.
I understand that to be enlightenment.
Okay, so do you see it as a spiritual sense that he's just come back to in people's lives individually? I mean, what do you mean by that?
By that I mean it's enlightenment. So, for instance, Thomas 108 says, "Whoever drinks from my mouth shall become like me, and I myself shall become that person." It's an incarnation of the Spirit of Christ. You become Christ. You become Jesus. That's what the second coming is to me.
Okay, so not a physicality,
Right.
Revelations, rapper and brimstone,
Which,
post-apocalyptic.
yeah, exactly. Which would explain why it says that it was only going to take a generation for somebody to come, for the second coming to take place.
Well,
And
a lot of
yeah.
people love to brush that off.
I know, yeah, they love it. They love it. That's my understanding, though, is that he actually meant within a generation, someone will become like me, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. Um, so I mean, it was very interesting. It's more of an interesting thought experiment more than a
Yeah,
I can say come to any solid conclusions because I mean it's the way I would treat like hard solipsism. Yeah, I can't disprove it, but that doesn't mean it's rational to believe.
that's true. That's true.
Um, so what I'm trying to get is, I mean, to demonstrate a burden of proof to where why would I want to accept what you believe?
Well, because it seems to be consistent with the scriptures. If you include the uh, Gospel of Thomas.
What about the other gospels?
As far as I only read the Synoptic Gospels, and I'm John, and I take all the epistles, but I don't read Acts or Revelations. The real
Really,
reason that
I would like, why would you consider Luke to be valid? I think that was the worst one. I mean, it's not even an eyewitness account, um, and it was written, you know, generations later.
right. Luke I think is the one that says that the kingdom of heaven is within man. That's the only reason I would take that one. To be honest, it's been so long since I've read them all. I can't remember what each one says specifically. I know that John's different.
John's the big one.
John is the big one, and I don't understand why. I mean, I was actually just doing some work on some of those debate forums, and I was trying to figure out because I just read the Quran recently, and one of the biggest things, the only thing that I saw in it that was of real significance was that it says that Jesus is not God. They say that it's a prophet and you're supposed to follow him and all that. They praise him highly, but they say that he's not God. And so I wanted to find out. Well,
he wasn't crucified either and came back.
And that too.
But there's a big reason because well, without original sin and the Quran, God forgives Adam.
Right. I guess. Does he?
You don't.
I haven't read that part yet.
Yeah. I mean, God forgives Adam, and original sin goes away. There is no original sin, so you don't need a crucifixion. You don't need a sacrifice.
Interesting.
And it completely absolves the idea that vicarious redemption is necessary.
Right.
So, but I mean, according to the Quran, God is Allah has hardened my heart as God hardened Pharaoh's, and I'll never come to the revelation of the last revelation from God.
Right. Yeah, that's some interesting stuff.
No, I the thing that I get the most out of the Quran is it's I guess you could say the enjoyment of reading the Book of Mormon. It's like, oh, let's see what happens when they turn it into fan fiction and retcon things.
Right.
And I mean, the Quran is basically a retelling of the old and the new.
Mm-hmm.
In an interesting way. It's mostly the same, but it changes some key things, like Jesus didn't die and he wasn't the Son of God, and there is no original sin, and things of that nature.
Right. Yeah.
But we can. I mean,
yeah.
the objectivity from Islam and stuff like that, because it's fairly new.
Right.
And it was interesting. There's a story about a congressman who was asking an atheist, and he was like, "So, why are Islamics just so passionate about their God and stuff like that?" And it's like, "Well, we actually can demonstrate that Muhammad existed, but we can't do it for
Yeah.
Jesus."
Right.
And it's basically what Christianity was doing 2,000 years ago. It's a fairly new religion. They're still in the Old Testament days where they're still enjoying eye for an eye.
Yeah.
And it's basically what the Levitical and Deuteronomy laws would have looked like
Mhm.
if in practice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that sounds about right.
it really should be more sobering towards, I would say, more Christians to, oh yeah, that's what we used to do.
Yeah.
But it's no excuse for the justification in 21st century,
Right.
the world.
Yeah.
But so I just want to step back here a little bit. I can appreciate things along the lines of, finding the value in, finding the beauty in Jesus in the sense. I mean, a lot of people like to cling towards um, whether it's belief itself or the things that he said. And there's no doubt that people are having powerful feelings for these things. But
Yeah.
we, like you were saying, we can attribute it to many of myriad of things that are completely inanimate. So how does this translate into reality is what I'm trying to get at. How do we know the things that you're saying
I'm not sure I
are
understand the question exactly.
so God exists, Jesus was his son, and I'm getting that so far, right?
I suppose.
Okay. And there is an afterlife in which it is going to be necessary at one point to accept this.
I wouldn't call it an afterlife, but yeah. I mean,
Oh,
it depends on what you mean by accept. I mean, you got to remember stuff like the Gospels, they play with words in a really funny way. Like, for instance, I've come to the conclusion that to believe in something is, no, I'm sorry, what was it? Faith is love. And believe is a very metaphorical kind of word.
is that according to Thomas? Because as far as the full
No,
gospel goes, I mean, faith is described in Hebrews 11 as that is which is not, desired but
yeah,
not seen.
but that was Paul. That was Paul. That wasn't Christ.
Okay.
So there are a few tiny little places where Paul and Christ conflict, and Paul even he's sometimes he's writing from an authority of God, and sometimes he's not. So that's one of the things where I'd say he probably messed up a little bit.
Well, I mean, he was a pretty screwed up guy before when he was Saul, but
He was.
I mean, the Road to Damascus experience is my favorite Bible tale because it shows that inquiry as to whether or not these claims have any validity will be met with blessings.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Good stuff.
but if a Road to Damascus experience is good enough for murdering Saul, it should be good enough for me, right?
I would think so. Yeah. Why not?
Okay. So, would you say, did you have a Road to Damascus experience that confirmed your
Uh,
faith?
no. My faith comes from a very rational point of view or place. But I did have an experience one time that was unrelated to this. Every once in a while, you ever read Variety of Religious Experience?
I don't think so.
Dude, that's the book you need to focus on next. This guy is incredibly sharp. He has a very rational view of like God and Christianity and all the different religions. He takes into account philosophy, all the different religions. I would highly recommend reading this guy. And then he stops short of mysticism. Mysticism is where you want to end because that's sort of the big end all be all payout where he talks about. But about several different spiritual experiences. I mean, some of them are incredible, and I actually had one that was mentioned in the book. But as far as like a conversion is considered, there was any one moment. It was more just when I was a sophomore in high school, we read the book Siddhartha. in the final chapter, he talks about how love is the most important thing in the world. And then he talks about how, by that, I mean, you have to respect, honor, and take care of everything that exists. And I remember hearing that and thinking to myself, you know, if there is a God, what more could he ask of us? To respect, honor, and just sort of take care of everything that exists. What more could a loving God and a reasonable God ask of us? So that's God. And then after that, I went to the Bible and I went, well, I wonder what the Bible has to say about this. And then after that, I read First Corinthians 13, you know, love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious, boastful, rude. And I remember thinking, well, shit, that's even better than that's even better what Siddhartha said. I mean, that's specifics as to what we're supposed to be. And I guess that would count as like, all right, if it's saying stuff like that, then this book clearly has something to teach us. And then, you know, I mean, and the one thing that really got me, at the time that I read this, I was studying philosophy. And so what they, you know, obviously philosophy means a love of wisdom. And so they're talking about knowledge and having an understanding of the world. And I remember in 1 Corinthians 13, it talks about if I have all understanding, if I have prophetic powers, if I have all knowledge and all understanding and all faith so as to remove mountains, if I don't have love, then I'm nothing. It's like saying that I might as well not even exist if I don't have love. So I remember that really hit home quite a bit. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. So does God interact with the world in any detectable ways?
You know, that's a great question.
Or rather, does he interact with the world at all?
Well, it depends on how you define God. I mean, if you define God as loving spirit, or if you define God as what Plato would say, the most beautiful mind, then God interacts with the world through people. I've heard my mom used to tell me this all the time. God speaks in circumstances, other people, and scripture, or something like that. So, I mean, if communicating counts, then I guess he does. Yeah.
Well, that seems like it to me. It seems like God is more along the lines of a metaphysical concept more than an actual physical being that
I wouldn't say that
the
he's
thinking agent.
right. Yeah. I would not say that. So, for instance, I believe it's in Revelations where they talk about God as a dude with a gray beard in the sky or something like that. I would not subscribe to that at all. In fact, recently I've been sort of rethinking my panentheism thoughts, where so God is both pantheistic, so he's all of matter and energy, and also there's some kind of transcendent.
I mean, that's
But
like as I think it's called asmotheism, where everything is a spirit or everything is a living force.
I haven't heard. Oh, animism. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know about that one. But does God interact with the world? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh no. Your question was your point was he seems more like a metaphysical concept as opposed to a being or an entity. Right. I would say that he's not an entity that's separate from. I don't know. See, now I'm questioning panentheism. Oh, maybe that's what it is. That's fucking genius. So I would argue both.
You'd argue both.
Yeah, he's both. So
Okay.
he's a metaphysical concept and he's a being, an
Okay.
entity.
And then does he interact with the world in any testable ways?
Testable ways. I mean, not as a concept. I mean, like as an entity, he is us. So you've heard that like the church is Jesus's body, right? And there's a book that came out a while ago. It's called Conversations with
Catholic.
God. Oh yeah, wouldn't yeah. But yeah, that's in the Bible, and also there's a book called Conversations with God that came out a while ago that talks about we are God's body. So when we talk about God being an entity, I would say that we are the entity, and both individually and as a collective, so that all human beings are God, and also all living beings, and also everything that exists. And then as a metaphysical concept, he's an ideal.
Okay, so we're going to start with, I just want to start with the physical part there. You're familiar with Occam's razor, right?
Of course.
Okay, so I feel like everything you just said, I can just hack off with Occam's razor and just say it's just the way it is naturally. I could just hack off everything that you said as that you're attaching your God to, and I could just hack it all away with Occam's razor and just say, okay, well that's just the way it presents.
I don't
Okay.
understand what you mean by it presents.
So if we were trying to say that, okay, um, you were saying earlier that um, it was apathy, right? Or
That's the best thing I can come up with at the time. Yeah.
okay, so
No. Lack of spirit would be apathy. Yeah.
okay, so someone with a spirit would be what?
The opposite of impassioned.
Okay, so if we can investigate impassioned, how do we do that?
Fuck if I know, dude.
So it it's it's just sounding more compound as opposed to, well, we can investigate things like people who claim to be impassioned and what their characteristics are.
Right.
Um, so, but in the end, we can get this down to, I'm sure, on a biological molecular level, to where we can investigate and say, okay, yeah, they have elevated T waves in their brain, and that's a great explanation as to why they feel this way.
Yeah.
Um, so if
To
we
ask,
can,
are you trying to put it in terms of materialism?
well, I don't see. I'm a,
I think you can.
methodological naturalist as opposed to a philosophical naturalist.
I don't know
Um,
what that means.
so methodological naturalism um, is the understanding of the limitations of naturalism, that unless supernaturalism, like some kind of supernatural, finds a way to be investigated, we have to stick with the natural.
Oh yeah,
And
I agree.
a philosophical naturalist would say there is no supernatural, there is only the natural.
I see.
So
Well, that's
science
what I think.
um, studies in the realm of methodological naturalism, which is what I ascribe to as well, because I feel like, since until there's a mechanism to demonstrate that the supernatural exists, I'm going to continue supporting the natural.
Well, I fully agree. I don't think there's anything supernatural that exists.
Okay. But when you talk about things like God and spirit and Jesus and miracles and so on and so forth, that is a suspension of the natural world.
So far, the only one that I could hear that would make any sense with that is miracles. But as far as I understand, all of the acts that occurred in the Bible are supposed to be.
Okay, so you don't believe in this, speaking in
No.
tongues or anything of that
Speaking,
nature.
as far as I understand, speaking in tongues is philosophy.
It's a learned trait. It's glossosia. It's a very fairly understood concept. It's not a mystery. um,
Right. Yeah. Um, yeah. So all these problems with supernatural stuff only occurs when you're a literalist, and I'm not one, so I don't have
okay,
any of those problems.
so I'm trying to get. I really what I'm trying to get to is, um, why should I believe it? Because it seems like it's just adding, um, and it's asking something, is answering something that's a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery.
I don't understand.
And well, we have these concepts like um, love, apathy, competitive spirit, things that are ambiguous enough, but they have no materialistic meaning. Okay, you can't hold empathy. You can't. What does the human spirit taste like? There is no
Right.
direct investigation of these things, but we can throw things onto them. I could easily say, oh, the reason why you have uh, competitive spirit is because Loki's
That's a great
influencing
one.
that.
That's not what I'm saying. The only thing that I'm saying um, is that it is that. So, for instance, God is competitive spirit or something like that. That's a great one, by the way. Shit, I just had an idea. I was going to say something. I can't remember what it was.
Okay,
Um,
so
the reason I would say that, like, for instance, spirit is God, love is God, things like that, is because without saying that those things are God, we fail to appreciate what they are and the significance of what they are.
Well, but I don't see how that conflates. I mean, I would say you're like you're saying, don't be a reductionist. Okay, I may not believe in the God that you want to attribute love to, but I know what the concept of love is. I know what love feels like. I don't need
Therefore,
to.
you know God.
Okay, but I mean, but that seems like you could just add anything. Okay, okay. The only reason why you love is
Pretty
because
much.
of Cupid, and if you
No,
can,
I mean, yeah,
if
I
you,
mean that would be perfect. That's great. That's
yeah,
great.
it
That's
would be
exact.
perfect, but it's a panacea. It doesn't explain anything. It has no explanatory power. It just
It's
gives.
not supposed to.
Okay, well, if it's just a panacea and it's a catch-all be-all for everything, then why is it logical to believe that?
Because it reveals the significance.
Okay, I mean, do you without and we don't have a proper investigation of multiple galaxies to investigate. We only have the one that we live in. We only have the single reality that we inhabit. And as it stands, we can't investigate what love would look like without God and love with God would look like. We can't investigate that. So it's just adding on to something that we can't even conclude actually exists.
You're saying love we can't conclude exists?
No, no, no. That we can't conclude that the base claim of God existing with, again, I'll just reiterate, you don't solve a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery.
What's the first mystery?
Well, to many people, any mystery like things along the lines of a lot of people find love mysterious.
Oh, so oh yeah, I'm not sure, but it's not. I'm not saying it's supposed to explain anything.
Okay, so if
It's
you're
only supposed to reveal the significance.
okay, so but that seems so arbitrary. But okay, so let's
Why?
ask this one. So if you are not a literalist, okay, you don't take everything literally as the Bible dictates, then
Right.
why either A, why believe anything at all, or B, why should I be a Christian?
Well, it depends on how you define Christian. I mean, if Christian is defined as most loving person in the world or person who is after perfection, then that sort of speaks for itself. And I forgot the first question.
Well,
Do
why
I believe
why believe anything at all?
it?
Why do you?
Well,
I don't understand how that would be compelling.
why? Well, because apparently, to believe something is to be loving. To
Okay,
believe in Christ.
but I mean, I can be a loving person without the.
Concept. Without the concept of Christ, you absolutely can.
Okay,
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they're the same thing.
okay. So then I'm trying to get to.
So you could. So what I would say is you could be an atheist Christian.
You can be an atheist Christian.
Yes.
I think you're trying to say you can be a. I mean, because you can be a Gnostic Christian or an agnostic Christian.
No, no. I mean, you could be an atheist Christian. You can reject the from a philosophical point of view. You can reject the idea of theism in general, and also be a loving person who is trying to perfect themselves. He is.
But human betterment isn't necessarily a Christian exclusive playing field.
I mean to identify the two. I mean to say that that's what that is. So I mean, Christianity existed long before Christ came.
So I mean, is just loving things the only thing that makes Christ Christ?
That's the only thing that makes a Christian a Christian.
Okay, so just it. So I'm a Christian simply because I love things.
Yeah, to the best of your, I would add.
Um, okay, so if I love the concept of hating God,
That's not loving though. That's not loving though.
I mean, I could see where you could find immense pleasure from it, but there are
It's not.
people
It's not
who are.
about pleasure. What I mean by loving, I mean benevolent or
Okay.
altruistic or compassionate.
Okay, but we know altruism and compassion, stuff like that, isn't, again, a Christian exclusive thing. At least people who self-identify
Yeah,
as
I'm saying
Christian.
right. I'm saying that
It's
what you're arguing about is a theological position, and I'm not arguing about a theological position. What I'm talking about is not theological; it's practical.
okay. So there's no other rational explanation that we can conclude to explain these mysteries.
What mysteries?
Well, I guess I guess if you consider these concepts such as love, empathy, and
Why are they mysteries?
well, I don't think they're mysteries, but to
Yeah, I don't either.
many Christians, they do are considered mysteries.
Yeah, no, not me.
Well, I mean, they would also say that, God's existence would be a mystery, but to me, it seems evident that it's
I
not.
mean, not any more than everything else that exists is a mystery
Okay.
as an existence thing.
So I mean, I'm trying to get the understanding of how conflating a concept such as love into becoming Christian.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time matching them. I'm trying to see where's
Why?
the. I feel like it's A plus B equals C, and you're missing B.
No, I'm saying A equals C.
Okay. Um, then it's a completely ambiguous, undefined term. I feel
What
like
is?
it. Well, love and Christian, then, if they both are synonymous with one another,
Yeah.
then I mean, I think that's just language then. I don't think that's anything tangible.
I mean, well, you could reference Paul when he says, "Love is patient, love is kind, not envious, boastful, arrogant, or rude." These
I,
are the traits of a loving person.
I mean, you're sounding more like more of a deist more than anything else.
No, because I believe God interacts with the world.
Okay. So, but I'm not seeing what characteristic the thing that you're defining as God and interaction. What
The human being.
Okay. I don't see what's so special about us.
Nothing.
Okay. So then you'd have to conflate us with all the other animals as well, right? Okay. So is that limited to just living things? What about non-living things?
No, that's non-living things too.
Okay. I don't know. Like I feel like you're bringing God down to, which I mean I'm completely fine with. I mean it seems almost harmless, this concept of God that you believe in.
Yeah.
So I don't see where. I guess there's really not a really big risk reward here, but
No, not really.
so
All right, let me say something really quick. You're
yeah.
talking about what you just said was I'm bringing the concept down. That's very interesting that you say that because I was doing some studying of I believe it was the Gospel of Philip, which is a great book, but I would caution reading against it. Um, in the information in the front of the book, they were talking about how certain words have been elevated to a certain status, and now they're being de-elevated. So, for instance, I think the one they came up with was father. So the reason the word father has been elevated so highly is because someday they're going to bring it back down, and the reason they're doing that is because they want to um, really reveal the significance of what a good father really is, how important it is to have a good father and mother too, but they only had one at the time, I guess. So what they did was they elevated the concept to divine status, and now they're de-elevating it. And likewise, what I believe happened with the concept of God was that it was elevated to a higher status than it already had, and now it's being de-elevated.
Okay. So what parts do you decide which are literal and which ones are to be taken in this metaphysical, metaphorical kind of realm?
That's a great question. So you're asking what is literal and what is figurative. I got to be honest with you. I do not have a specific answer. The only thing that I can tell you is that it's very clear to me when I'm supposed to take something literally and when I'm supposed to take something metaphorically. If you gave me specific passages, ones that you're having trouble with, I could tell you what I think they are.
Well, I mean, the littlest things. I mean, like if I were to consider you a literalist, things along the lines of how he was saying the mustard seed was the smallest seed, when they used
Right.
poppy, clearly that's a smaller
Yeah.
seed. I mean, from a literalist standpoint, that sounds as an issue. For me,
Yeah.
he's just trying to get the point across that,
Exactly.
hey, it's don't let size, breed the issue.
Right. I mean,
Um,
what I'm hearing is, for instance, he's talking about it's the smallest seed that becomes the biggest seed. What I'm hearing is there's a connection between faith and love. He says, if you believe in me, then follow my commandments. My commandment is to love. So so there's no B in the middle there. It's just A to C. So faith equals love. So what he's saying is the smallest thing to do, the easiest thing to do is to love somebody or to love something or to be loving. And in the end, what the most important thing is happens to be the easiest thing. It starts out as the easiest, it becomes the most important. It starts out as the mustard seed, it becomes the tree, the big tree or something like that.
okay, so I mean, I'm trying to get a hard stance out of you on a lot of things. I feel like it's
Yeah.
and I don't want to say that you're unsure of your beliefs, but they do seem
So,
pretty ambiguous. Well, in the sense that I feel like I can insert anything that I want to believe into I guess what I would consider the holes.
mhm. You probably could.
So
I'd probably agree with you. But you have to
and
give me an example.
things and it's really hard to give an example because I don't know where exactly you believe on a lot of I would say commonalities that I find within Christians.
Mhm. Yeah, not many.
And yeah, so it's it's definitely an interesting conversation for me because
Yeah,
I've
I'm glad.
never actually met someone who took the Gnostic Gospels as canonized or literal or even
Sure. Can
yeah. So as far as the miracles that Jesus performed, do you believe that those were
They're all
legitimate?
metaphorical.
They're
I believe they're all
metaphorical.
metaphorical. True, but metaphorical, but true. For instance, this is really interesting actually. When he's talking about the Last Supper, he talks about multiplying or not multiplying, but and the wine. And I remember thinking, as I sort of read it out of order. I read what happened in the Last Supper, and then I read what happened before it, just before it, second. And I remember thinking, this sounds like he's setting a good example for other people. And then right before it says something about a good example. So a lot of stuff like that sort of happens. The same thing with the multiplying of the bread. I believe that means they set a good example, and then however many people that ate the bread or how many pieces that it was put into, that's how many people followed the good example.
Okay. So why should I believe this?
Because it's convincing.
So is it convincing from a metaphysical standpoint where it seems to fit given the belief in the conclusion?
It seems to fit as far as I can tell. It seems to fit with the rest of Scripture.
Okay. Well, generally speaking, like things along the lines of believing in a literal lake of fire according to Revelations and
Yeah.
eternal paradise according to Matthew and Mark. Um, whether or not that's in the skies or not, they seem to actually describe it as more of a farmland and vineyards, and it was a place,
Hmm.
the countryside, is what they
Right.
seem to. But that's conjecture. Either way, I'm trying to see what is why I should hold these views. Besides, you find them compelling. Um, is there a punishment for denying this?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no. Well, I mean, yes, in the sense that you make a shittier world if you don't believe what I believe. And also, if you believe what I believe, it helps you find heaven on earth.
Okay. Well, I could find metaphorically heaven on earth, you know,
Yeah.
myself without the belief. I mean,
Uh,
I have great pleasures. I enjoy my life very much. I actually can't think of many negatives. At least when I look around with other people who, Christian or not, I think I live a quite nice life. Maybe it's because I'm white
the
and
only
I'm
thing,
male.
right? Yeah. Well, the
That
only
hidden
thing I would say,
patriarchy.
yeah, if your level of bliss matches my level of bliss, then we believe in the same thing.
Okay, but I still don't accept your conclusion that it's God is convincing.
Well, if God is love and love exists, then God must exist.
Okay, but that's like the if God is love and love is blind, then Ray Charles has to be God.
No, it's different. It's slightly different.
I mean, that's the same conclusion that I come to. You say if, if God is love and you love, therefore God exists. I mean, I don't understand how you can
Yes,
come to that conclusion.
because love exists and love equals God.
Okay, I mean, if you're just gonna say that, I mean, that God is the embodiment of the feeling that we get from love, then that reduces God to
Uh, I would argue, and this is going to be a moot point, but I would argue that it's more benevolence than it is romanticism or romanticness.
well, no matter how you define it, it's each way that you define it. I feel like God loses power.
Yeah, he's not as powerful as people seem. I guess people argue. I guess.
Right. I mean, when I think of a God, I think of something that's an all-powerful or a very powerful being with extraordinary powers.
Love is pretty powerful, man. We've changed the world with love.
Yeah, but there are animals that lack empathy, and there are animals that have
That's
plenty of
true.
empathy. I mean, we can objectively look at the four chemicals that I was speaking of earlier. Um, we can look at animals that have way too much of those things, things along the
Yeah.
lines of certain birds that will kill themselves after their mate dies. Um,
Right.
we have animals that will commit suicide on a more frequent rate than we do. Um,
Wow.
and yet I'm trying to see where the God fits in all of this. I mean, did God?
See, that's the problem, man. We've got a mistaken understanding of what God is. So
Okay,
the only reason you're having trouble with that is because you've already got a preconceived notion of what God is, and the only reason you have that is because that's what we've been told. We've been taught something's not necessarily the case. When
well,
we say that
th-
it's God, we want to reveal the significance of what we're talking about.
right, and if you, I mean, it's hard for me because when I think of Christian God, I think of the God that, I mean, did God create the universe?
Um, if you want to say the Big Bang is God, then yeah.
Okay, but then that just means that, well, if God can be inserted into these things, then I feel like it again, and like you said, it's a panacea. Um,
I have to look up that word, man. How do you spell that?
uh, PAN. I can't think of it right now, but
All right, hold on. I gotta look that up, man, because I can't. That seems like a pretty crucial word.
well, it's like a placebo.
Give me 1 second. Oh, I found it. Get this, it's the God of universal health.
Okay.
Let's see here. I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up your time. Hold on.
No, no, it's fine. I mean, it essentially means it's a placebo.
Yeah. What God is?
Yeah.
Um. It's an X-ray.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain that a little bit
Elaborate.
better.
Hold on 1 second. A solution or remedy for all difficulties or diseases. So it's a fix-all.
Yes.
Uh, um, all I want to say is that it reveals the inner significance. So, for instance, what I want to say is that when we talk about benevolence, so special, so significant, so important that we practice benevolence in the world, that we might as well call it God. You might as well deify it.
Right,
Because
and I'm trying to pass this, kind of vague deism to something that's, concrete and observable.
every act of love.
Right, but I mean, really, it's like I feel like you're arguing for Cupid more than at least what I
I could
consider a
be.
Christian God.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
I mean, but then I guess why would you be a Christian? Because then I could say you
Because I
should
define
be.
it differently. I define it differently.
Um, let's. I was just talking about this. It's basically the religion that imbues everything as far as being the best human being you possibly could be.
Right. That's what it's
And
about.
it's a completely deist slash atheist centric.
It's not deist because it can't be deist if there's interaction with the world. Are you talking about interaction with something that's like alive?
If deist can be something, I mean, it's basically an uninteracting God.
Yeah. So what I'm asking is, so for instance, if I'm a loving person and I do a loving act, then is love not interacting with the world through me?
Right, but and it does, and that's we can investigate that interaction, but that doesn't mean that you can insert something to add to that explanation.
Oh, so you're talking about like as oh shit, I just had it. Like a supernatural entity that exists by itself on its own, separate from that. Is that what you're asking?
Well, if you're just saying like love is controlled by Cupid, and the reason why you love music is because Apollo has infused it, I mean,
Uh,
there's
that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's because of God. I'm saying it is God.
right, and
Well,
and people could say,
unless you want to say that the reason that I act lovingly is because of love.
well, I mean, we can reduce it down to a naturalistic explanation. Therefore,
Right.
love isn't necessarily a mystery.
Right.
And using the examples of we have things that don't have the compassion that you and I have for our fellow species, but I
Right.
mean, the spectrum is all over the place. And if
Mm-hmm.
the spectrum's all over the place, and it seems as if another naturalistic way, I mean, we may think as having mates as necessary for the pact, but others are screwing other animals are screwing everything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a reason, a naturalistic reason why we do that,
Right.
but there's when you're adding things to love, it seems like you're making an argument for Cupid or for music, an argument for Apollo. It seems like it just injects itself into the very thing you're trying to prove.
Um, I mean, I don't know. There's a couple ways I want to respond. What I'm just not sure I'm getting what you're trying to get at. Um, it seems like I don't know if you're talking about something like, are you asking if it's too overdetermined? So, for instance, overdeterminism is like when I say that lightning has an explanation, and then in top of that, I talk about how Zeus is the explanation as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's in part.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the problem is that I'm not saying that they're two separate things. That only exists if they're two separate things. What I'm talking about is they're the same thing. It's just another word for it. It's a synonym.
Okay. Then I don't.
Then you want to go deist?
Well, if God is everything and everything is God, then
Mm-hmm.
that means also nothing is God.
I used to think that too, but I'm not entirely sure that's correct.
I don't see where. I mean, to me, a table is still a table. I'm not thinking table plus God. You know.
Right, but maybe you should be. That's very Zen.
Okay. And again, I just feel like it's adding the Zeus to the lightning.
But it's not. It's not because you're not. It's only that if you're saying that they're separate things, but they're not separate things.
Okay.
To add, you have to be adding two separate things.
Okay, well, maybe I just need to hear, or maybe I'm gonna stop asking questions and I'm just gonna have you explain your beliefs in 5 minutes.
Okay. Hold on, I'm gonna take you outside. I'm gonna smoke a cigarette. Give me 1 second.
Okay, while you do that, I think I'm gonna eat.
All right, cool. Sounds good. Oh, baby. Got a good jacket.
I'm here, by the way. You can.
Okay. Yeah, just give me 1 second. All right. So, I got to tell you, I think I've already told you everything that there is to say. It is basically about love, and that's about it. I don't consider it a theological position.
Okay, then what do you consider it?
Practical.
What would you say is practical about it?
Love.
Okay, but doesn't that like get into the definition of why it's there?
What do you mean?
Well, if love is God and God is love, and it's practical to believe in God because God is love, that
No,
seems
no,
very circular.
no, it's like it's practical to believe in love because love is gonna it's what changes the world.
Okay. Well, I can argue that um, Hitler loving the Jews really changed the world.
Yeah, that's a good point. But did he love the Jews? I mean, he killed them.
Of course not. Yeah, I was using it ironically.
Oh, I see.
What?
Yeah, well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Nope, just ice. That's it. Thank you.
See, right there, I would argue that's proof of God.
But that still doesn't get past the actually demonstrating that that is actually God. You can, I mean,
I'm not arguing for a God that's an entity. Well, yeah, no, I don't think so.
okay,
Hence, you could be an atheist and a Christian at the same time.
huh? So it's just finding a hard time trying to see why. I feel like it's a very safe bet.
Yeah, it is. It's a very safe bet.
So, and is there a reason why you don't accept a
The traditional. Go ahead.
traditional evidentialism? I mean, not evidentialism.
Oh,
Why aren't you a biblical literist?
because well, first of all, because Jesus wasn't a literalist. Not first of
Okay.
all, but that ends up being what it is.
Okay. So if
For instance, he talks. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, I can see the story essence of it. I mean, we can look at the allegory of Genesis just being a
Yeah,
telling of the agricultural revolution,
could be.
and it's written in early style poems where it's
Hmm.
to be read as a poem, not as a
Right.
story.
Right.
So,
Book account.
right. Now, I can appreciate, finding meaning in these things and stuff like that. I agree with most of the Ten Commandments. Just like
Okay.
I agree with most of at least the ones that matter. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the first three are solipsistic towards God and
Sort of.
um,
Yeah.
how you honor Him and stuff like that, and then you have well, don't lie, don't cheat, steal, don't. The best one being don't bear false witness.
Yeah.
Um, but there's also a reason why 2 out of 10 of them are laws, because out of practicality, that's an unrealistic way to run a city state.
Yeah. Agreed.
Um, but so why couldn't Jesus just be metaphorical as well?
I think he is. I think he's Socrates.
So you think he is Socrates, or you just think
I
his
think he
concepts are
is.
Socrates?
I think
Okay.
he is Socrates.
See, that was something I was gonna ask, and it was something along the lines of, well, you may appreciate Socrates, but is there, like, if Socrates doesn't exist, is there any consequences for not believing in him?
No.
No,
Well, I mean,
but
in the same sense that there's consequences for not believing that love is an important thing.
well, if you don't think that empathy is important, then you're probably less empathetic.
That's what I mean.
Um, I mean, that may be demonstrable, but that doesn't demonstrate the base claim. At least
Which
not,
is
I don't think sufficiently. Oh, that
what's the
God
base claim?
exists.
How doesn't it? It's like if I say that I'm empathetic, then how does that not demonstrate that empathy exists?
Okay, yeah, and that's all it is demonstration that empathy exists. That's it. We don't need to go
Perfect.
any further.
That's right.
Empathy
Except that nobody,
exists.
except that you'll notice that just because empathy exists and the average human being knows, let's assume the average human being knows what empathy is and what it does. Yet some people are still not empathetic.
Right, because we also know that just like every other trait, um, through environment that can be fixed.
I don't understand what you mean.
Um, do you believe that you are capable of killing someone?
Yeah,
Not just your physicality, but let's say if within for no fault of your own, if you're put into a situation where you for no consequences would kill someone.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't go out of my way to do it. But if someone would, so for instance, if you have someone on life support and they were in a coma and they were experiencing, awful pain and stuff like that, then I would be able to do that. Yes.
Well, there's an experiment that was done that was trying to get an understanding of how the Nazis, why they were the way that they were.
Right.
And they couldn't believe that they were human and they had
Hmm.
human emotions for the atrocities that they committed. And
Right.
they took random individuals off the street and they did an experiment which would, at the end of the experiment, would have the participant killing someone else. It was all staged, but they took people off the street and put them in a scenario where you would kill a stranger.
Right.
And they predicted it's like, okay, probably a percent of a percent would get to the point where they would actually kill a stranger. And
Wow.
um, it turned out they got over 70%.
Wow.
And now they've
And these are
refined,
Nazis or people in general?
no, these are just people, you and me.
Wow.
And to this day, they've almost got down to the point where they can almost get 100%.
Wow.
Now, if everyone is completely capable of this what we could say situational murder, if you will.
Mhm.
If we're all completely capable of getting to that point, I don't understand where a potential God concept that you're demonstrating God as love can fit into something that we can demonstrably demonstrate that people's ability to make what you consider empathetic decisions goes out the window.
I'm still don't understand what you're asking me. Where does God fit in? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, how does God fit into this equation?
Because we can kill people?
No, because nearly every single person can be put in the a situation where you would.
Are you asking what good is God?
No. It's not the problem of evil. Though that doesn't seem to that wouldn't even phase you, I don't think.
I mean, what is the purpose of God? Is that what you're asking?
How does this, knowing that we are all capable of great empathy and great lack thereof,
Yeah.
and be destructive towards one another in
Right.
the least empathetic way, where does this God concept fit?
I'm not understanding what you mean by where does it fit.
We can take the most empathetic person and then within the course of 2 hours turn them into a murderer.
Right. I understand that.
Now, if that's the case, God just seems like a benevolence then.
That's what he is.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, if if God is reduced to, uh, to basically what we already consider as the natural world, then I don't see either the reason or the consequences for not believing it.
Sorry, you cut in and out.
Oh, okay. Um, no, my mic is, I guess, getting a little faulty. Um,
Sorry.
I was saying, like, if God is reduced just to what we can observe and what we already with if everything, then I don't see where the either the point of belief is or the consequences of disbelief.
I mean, I mean, um, so the point of belief is to sort of reduce that number of people who will become killers down as much as possible, and the consequence for not believing in him is will increase or fail to decrease.
Okay, but when we look at things like prison uh, populations, and we see that there are more Christians in prison than there are Christians by percentile, and there's drastically less crime, atheists and non-believers
Right.
as opposed to their demographic.
Right.
And then we look at places like Sweden and Norway, which are predominantly non-believers, are very,
Right.
very fruitful
I would
countries.
argue.
Sorry.
I would argue that there's a difference. There's the problem is that what we understand by the word believer is mistaken. It's almost become opposite now.
Okay. So,
So what I mean to say is a believer is anyone who is very loving. So that when we talk about Sweden and the other place you mentioned, those people are actually believers, despite the fact that theologically speaking, they're not believers.
okay. I'm just trying to get where how belief can translate into love.
That's a good question. I can tell you is that in the book, and Christ says something about like, if you love me, then you'll do what I say, or if you believe in me, you'll do what I say. And so faith is supposed to translate into love. So I think they're using the word belief very much sort of metaphorically.
Okay. I mean, I don't see where uh I mean, if we're looking at the Bible as just purely metaphorical, um I don't know where you can get the literal bits out.
What do you mean?
It feels like it's just cherry picking, like in a very extreme, point of cherry picking.
I don't understand how it is.
Well, you're taking out obviously the literalist things as far as the Genesis account. I mean, Jesus said that Adam and Eve did exist. So, I mean, if you take out that, I mean, Jesus didn't mean that, figuratively, unless he was talking figuratively about a figurative story, um, which I think only just it just presents more questions than answers.
Did he say that they exist, or is it more implicit?
He was talking as if they were actual figures. And when he talked of
Yeah,
the
but that doesn't.
battles and the kings
Yeah,
and stuff
but
like that,
doesn't mean that he's saying they're literal though.
okay, but when we read it as this as a historical event and Jesus said these things, whether or not those are accurate or not, I don't know how they
Is
can
it?
do that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's the way to read it. Do you have a specific passage you'd like for me to read?
um, well, I mean, if things along the lines of according to the Gospels, like when we're trying to investigate whether or not Jesus was an actual figure and he did the things that he did, or the events
Mm-hmm.
that transcribed actually happened. I mean, we look
Mm-hmm.
at things like, oh, there was a global earthquake, according to
Yeah,
two of the
yeah.
Gospels,
I don't think that there was an actual global earthquake or something like that.
and then there was a global eclipse, and then there was a mass resurrection, and
Yeah, I mean, well, all right. So for the resurrection, has something to do with the fact that there are two different kinds of people. There are those people who can be reached, and there are those people who, by definition, cannot be reached. And by reached, I mean they can be converted, and by that I mean someone who can go from being an unloving person to a loving person. So the resurrection is someone who cannot be reached, who is reached nevertheless. Then I'm still figuring out what what was the eclipse and the stars falling from heaven. I'm still figuring out what those are. I believe it has something to do with Genesis, where it talks about what the sun is or something like that. It talks about it being a great light in the sky and stuff like that. And then I'm pretty sure it has something to do with the fact that they give off light, and light is supposed to be understanding or something like that. So it might be something like figures that we believed could lead us are becoming arbitrary, not arbitrary, but irrelevant, because we've sort of like student has become the teacher kind of thing.
okay.
And then I forgot what the last one was.
Oh, but the mass resurrection. I mean, that was the okay.
That was the first one I did. Was the resurrection. I
Oh,
can't
wait,
remember
there's
what the first one was.
earthquake.
Earthquake. Yeah, earthquake. I'm still figuring out what the earthquake was, but I believe it has something to do with trembling and fear.
Okay.
Or, for instance, in Thomas, it talks about how. Hold on, I'll tell you what it says. First, hold on. Gospel of Thomas. Seek until you find, and when you find, you'll be distraught, and then you'll rule over all, or something like that. I think the distraughtness is representative of to the earthquake.
Okay. So then how do you I'm just trying to wonder if, we're going to write off Adam and Eve as
As
metaphorical,
historical,
then
yeah, I would. I would.
why not do the same with Jesus?
I just did. We say Socrates, not Jesus.
Okay, Socrates.
He might have been an invention. Largely, I think he was an invention of Plato's.
Okay. I mean,
All right. So check this out. Check this out. Here's their. Those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. When they are disturbed, they will marvel and reign over all. And after they have reigned, they will rest. So the disturbed part, I will argue, corresponds to the earthquake.
all right. No, it's just it's I would say a different interpretation that I'm definitely more keen to when I have these
Yeah.
discussions. So you weren't wrong when you said you were definitely had different beliefs.
Alternative. Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else share these beliefs? Okay, so would you say it's a self-revelation, if you will?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, fair enough. Well,
Yeah.
unless you have any questions for me, I think it's a good time to wrap it up.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure talking with you, Chris. And if
You too.
I'll hit you up later. I enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
All right. Bye.